essentially is creating, any type of story you want. Almost like, what if your child could be the star of their own Disney movie? And then I felt sorry, and I apologized to her, sat with her, took the time, and course corrected, even to be able to empathize and see that. And like, look, we're not perfect. I'm not this parent that's just going to like ignore how you're feeling. Yeah. I think like the most masculine thing is to be emotionally present, right? And to show that like you have a softness to you.
This video is kindly sponsored by Read Mentor School, which are an online independent Muslim school for children aged 6 to 16, where you can get the British National Curriculum full-time education alongside your Islamic values and Islamic studies. Do check them out on readmentorschool.com. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the Dadhood podcast, where we interview Muslim fathers about their journey on fatherhood. And alhamdulillah, we have a guest here today that I've managed to speak to a few times here and there in passing. We visited each other, we've seen each other in London. Now he lives across the world. But finally, we connected with each other online, alhamdulillah, and we're able to have this amazing conversation about fatherhood. So, alhamdulillah, we've got as a guest, Omar Choudary. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Omar, how are you?
Walaikum assalam, man. Thanks for having me, bro. Really good to finally have a proper conversation with you, man. It's always in passing, you're right. It's always a quick hello, but it's nice to sit down properly. Thank you for having me.
No worries. I've been seeing online that you've been putting out, since you started your social media many years ago, I've been following, and you always refer back to family in pretty much everything that you do, whether it's a decision, even a career decision that you've made, whether that has been things that you've made, decisions you've had to make because of religious reasons, but they're also tied into family reasons. And, even things like moving your whole family abroad, obviously there may have been multiple intentions for that, but you've made it a big reason for that is family as well. That's what you've made it very clear on your social media. And you, alhamdulillah, I think every year you sort of do like a roundup post, especially when it comes to your anniversary, when you talk about kind of what the journey's been like with you and your wife and all the kind of children that you've had on the way, alhamdulillah. So I think it's really important to kind of get your perspective on a few things, given that you're somebody like myself who thinks through the lens of, okay, all the decisions I'm making, how does that line up with my family lifestyle? But that being said, I have our first question that we ask to every guest, okay, which is, how old were you when you became a father, and how many children do you have?
I was 25 when I became a father, and I have 3 now, alhamdulillah. So one girl, my eldest is a girl, she's about to be 8, and then I have a 4-year-old boy, and a 6-year-old boy.
MashaAllah, that's amazing, bro. Allahumma barik, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put more barakah in your family. I just want to take you back to when you're 25 years old then. Do you remember the moment when you brought your baby home? And what was that feeling like? And I believe that was Sienna, if I'm correct, is your oldest one, yeah?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. Sienna, man, my baby girl. Wow, like it's interesting because I was only speaking to my wife recently about, we were speaking about the birth of each of the kids and the pregnancies, and recently we were just reflecting on that. We didn't actually speak about bringing her home, so that's quite interesting you bring that up. I do remember bringing her home, and I think even more so, just in the build up to her being born, I was very anxious, man, because I just, I felt so confused, as to, what does it mean to be a dad, and, will I be a good dad? And there was no one to really talk to as well, because my friends, didn't really have kids until, a few years after me, really. So I had my sister at the time had her kids, but there was not really any dads for me to speak to. And, I hadn't really spoken to my dad about it either. So I think there was definitely a lot of like anxiety. And then when she came home, I think the first thing I remember just being, feeling just overwhelmed with gratitude that I was even, blessed to be a father. And I actually made a video. It was on my YouTube. I don't think it's not there anymore, but I made a video when she came home. And I was just walking around and I was sharing my thoughts. And I think some of the things that stood out to me was just this, like, almost this, it's almost a miracle. Sounds like such a cliche, but that's literally what it felt like, like how is this human being, this breathing, living entity, kind of, being given to me. And now I have this responsibility to look after her. And I have no idea if I'll be good enough, if I'll be able to, but you know, that the kind of the journey and that curiosity, the curiosity really sparked that journey, I suppose, of, you know, me trying to at least do my best every day and trying to kind of answer that question as I went. So yeah, I think with all the children, you know, it kind of, as soon as they came home, it lit that kind of curiosity and that spark of like, okay, this is the mission now, and you know, let's conquer it. So that's where we started.
Mashallah. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned that you didn't have anyone to talk to, and that's actually one of the reasons I created this podcast. Is when my wife was pregnant, I was looking online for resources, for articles, for podcasts that were not just from a parenting angle, but more specifically a father angle. And there was loads of things out there for mums, and not much things out there for dads that you could relate to. And then even on top of that, if you did find things that were for dads, it wasn't really culturally or religiously relevant as well. But yeah, okay, 90% of parenthood is going to be the same across humanity, right? But there's that 10% that you want to be able to have that kind of comfort of knowing, okay, this person who's like me went through this particular thing. So I find that quite interesting, because I was hoping that if I started something like this and there's like a repository online somewhere that somebody might search some sort of keyword and they'll pop up on across their feed, and if they haven't had a role model in their life, if they haven't had a father in their life or an uncle, whatever it may be, that they could look up to, at least they can find some perspective from the brothers that come on to this podcast. And I don't know if you want to talk about this, but you have mentioned in the past on your social media about there was a period in your life where you weren't living with your father and there was a bit of a distance. Do you feel like that period, and again, if you don't want to answer, you don't have to, but do you feel like that period has changed your perspective on the way that you approached fatherhood when you first became a father? Did that create some sort of notions in your head of like, well, we were separated, so maybe I don't know how to do this thing, or could I really ask my dad about these things, or do I really know how to be a good father? Or what were the kind of thoughts that you feel like you had at that time?
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. And first of all, I just want to commend you for actually, it's interesting because we're on this podcast. My kids just came home from school. And so this is probably one of the few times where you can be actually recording something and you don't really have to apologize for kids banging on the door, because it's part of what the program is about. So I want to commend you for setting this up, by the way, because I definitely think conversations like this are important, and it's great that you've done this from your own experience. By the way, how many kids do you have now?
Alhamdulillah, I've got 3 kids as well. I just had a newborn 6 months ago, and my oldest is 6, Isa, and then I've got a 4-year-old, Sarah.
Amazing, mashallah, man. May Allah make them coolness of your eyes, man, and bless them abundantly in this life, man. Mashallah.
Ameen.
Wow. So yeah, my father, I think you're right. My mom and dad separated when I was probably about 11. I think I was 11 years old. But I was on another podcast recently, and we were speaking about a similar topic. And actually, there's kind of 2 things that come to mind. I think one of them is I've heard this phrase kind of as I got older of like hurt people, right? And like I didn't want to be one of those people where if I've been through something which felt a bit like heavy on me, to then go and like recreate the environment. Instead, I want to do the opposite, which is if I've been through something, and parents being separated, it's quite common these days. It happens, for whatever reason. And when it does, because you are still young, and even now at the age of, I'm 32 now, I'm still figuring life out, right? I don't know everything at all. And so, when you're young, especially, you don't really know what's going on. And so you don't really have the emotional intelligence to understand what your parents might be going through and to empathize with them. So I think now that I'm older, the first thing is that I can definitely, and I think this is even more recently that my kids are a bit older now, that I can empathize more, because I feel like now I'm at the age of where my dad was when he went through everything. And so I can see it from his lens as opposed to just from my mom's lens. So I think that's very important. And I think like that's definitely a newfound empathy that I've developed. But in terms of when I was having the kids, I do remember that when I was younger, some of my fondest memories with my dad were those where I'd kind of, I'd come down in the morning, for example, and he might be just lying down on the sofa, for instance, and I'd have my toy cars, and I'd just be like, when you got a blanket on and you got all those kind of crevices and, in the blanket, and I'd be riding my cars if they were like mountain trails, and that was like a happy moment for me. Or like, him, so I've been on a holiday with him when I was like, really young, or like, we'd stay together, take me out everywhere, or take me to his meetings and places he'd go to. And so, I remember all those type of things, and those feelings I felt actually you know, really outshine the moments where I'd felt any form of like, you know, dad's not there, or where is he, or, you know, negative emotion. I think I felt more of them probably in my adolescence because, you know, naturally probably, you know, hormonal and emotional and, you know, not really understanding things and trying to find my own way. And, you know, I've got a younger brother and I'm the man of the house now and all this type of stuff, you know, kind of plays on you. And so as I'm older now, I empathize more with what he's going through and I can kind of play my position, I think, as a son better. I hope so, at least, and give him that respect more than maybe when I was younger. I saw it more like, you know, oh, this has happened to my mum. And so with my children, yeah, it's more like those feelings I felt, those happy moments I was saying outshined anything negative. I wanted them to have that all of the time. And so when I see these moments, for example, like, you know, they're coming from school and, you know, these days I'm, you know, working basically at home, you know, I'm upstairs and I know that when I get to see them, what feeling they must be feeling, because I remember what it was like when I came home from school, and it wasn't that often that my dad was home when I would come in from school because he was working a lot. But when I did see him, it was like, whoa, you know what I mean? Or very rarely my dad would drop us off or pick us up from school. My mum would do that a lot, but when he did, it was like, I remember the love and the happiness. And maybe that's a specific connection between a father and son, or maybe just with father and the kids. Obviously, it was different with my mum because we were around her all the time. So I don't think as you know, incredible and as amazing as that environment was, I probably didn't like notice the emotion as much because it was so normal to me. Whereas with my dad, it felt more special. And so I think, like, you know, I do try and recreate that a lot. And so I see those moments through my kids' eyes now, and I try to create a lot more of those. So, like, you know, when I'm present, they must really feel what I felt when I would have that with my dad. So yeah, I think that's where I take some of that and try to implement it into the day-to-day with the kids now.
Yeah, that's incredible, bro. I think it takes probably a huge journey of self-reflection and healing to get to a point where you can look back at that experience and say, all right, there's a new perspective in which I can look at this and let me bring the positives of whatever that experience was and whatever memories I have of that experience, and let me try and keep away any of the negative experiences for the sake of my children. And unfortunately, a lot of brothers don't go through that journey. And the reason I say this is because even me personally, I didn't grow up with my father, and there was the kind of, you know, resentment feeling there, and there was that feeling of, okay, this has been done to my mom, and viewing it from the lens of when you're younger is like, okay, I don't want anything to do with him in the sense that of how he is. I wouldn't want that to be done to my children, or the way that I kind of raise my children. But then when you kind of go on this journey of self-reflecting, getting closer to Allah, understanding what human beings really are, and that we're all flawed at the end of the day. And then as you get older and you realize, like you said, you get to an age where maybe you're now at that age when whatever he was going through as well. And you realize that, okay, when you're at this age, there's actually multiple factors that could have taken place that ended with that particular, the event ended in that particular way. And because of that, it means you can now have an extra level of empathy, like you said, an extra level of mercy there to really understand that situation. And then it actually then helps you reset as well, because there's something deep inside that individual who's always been looking at the situation from the outside, like, there's like a question I really want to ask, or there's something that I really want to overcome. And it's like, oh, I actually don't need to do that anymore. There is no reason for that. That feeling, it doesn't really matter as much as I thought it does, because now I have this new perspective. And I think if we don't go through that, and a lot of people don't actually, they continue to let that feeling preside inside themselves, and they're always acting as a reaction to whatever's happened in the past. They're just constantly within a reaction, and you have to kind of move past that and, you know, start sailing your ship. Essentially, you can't let the past really sail you.
You know, there's a few things come to mind based on what you're saying. First of all, I give a lot of credit to my sister. She's a year older than me, and she has the most fondest memories of our childhood, even though she like feels things very heavily in terms of emotion. Like she, you know, can take herself back to any one of those places, and she probably, you know, remembers a lot more than me, even though she's just a year older. And there's things she remembers that I don't even, to me, they never happened, but obviously they did because she remembers them. But her perspective is always, you know, she looks at it so fondly in terms of, you know, mum and dad and all these types of things. And then when I would sometimes go through my moments and frustrations, I'll share that with her. And then hearing her perspective made me soften myself, right? And be like, hold on a second, she's right. Like, it's not all kind of doom and gloom and, you know, this happened to me or whatever. It's like, let me at least look at it from a slightly different perspective. And I think that helped me. And I think that the second thing I was going to say, but I think Ramadan brain is hitting me. The second thing I was going to say, there was a point you made around, sailing your own ship. And I think that's very important in terms of reflection, because you have to be willing to constantly evolve and change how you think about things, right? Like every day and every conversation, every dialogue is a new piece of information that you didn't have a second prior or a day prior or a week prior. And that's fact. And I think like we have to look at the way life works just factually. And these type of things are happening all the time where we're developing and changing. And then you're taking this information and you have to be willing to change the way you think, right? Like, so if you get a new piece of information, like, for example, one conversation with my sister, you have to reflect on that. And you have to go into your engine, which is your brain, your body, your soul, your spirit. And then it's another layer that plays a part in how you then output your personality or your mindset or your actions, right? Those are the outputs. That's how we present ourselves in the world or the work we do internally. And so you have to allow these inputs to come in. That's why you have to be open to receiving information and welcome conversations, be listening, you know, understand that no one's above you, aside from Allah. No one, you're not above anyone else, you know, in terms of, you know, from ego perspective, that, you know, you can listen to anyone, you can take any type of information in. Even for my children themselves, they teach me so much about myself in every interaction. And I receive that information and there's no filter inside my body. It's like, I just want to take that in. And then normally our reaction is our past, our history, or what we think we should react like. And that is, you know, blocks us in a lot of ways from making progress, because we just jump into a reaction. It's like a knee-jerk type of thing. But we're doing it with our emotional response. And instead, you want to just allow things to happen, right? And don't feel them immediately. Like, yes, we're human and we're going to have emotional reactions if someone does something to hurt us or we feel something in a conversation. But if you can train yourself, which is very rare to find people like this, and if you can train yourself to almost have any type of dialogue and just ingest it and then reflect on it, and even say to people, you know what, let me think on that, let me come back to you, or, you know, go away yourself and keep your emotions calm, you actually find that you will learn so much from that, and it does just 10x's your personality, because you allowed yourself to take in that information as opposed to just react to it. And by reacting to it, you're doing a few things. You're first of all putting up a wall immediately and not presenting yourself properly. You're also not allowing that information to come into the right place and to be able to, you know, ingest it properly, because your guards are up, and so you're not allowing it to even come in. You're stopping at the front door. And if you just allow that to come in, whatever that feedback might be, and feedback doesn't have to be negative, it could just be a dialogue or whatever, that can really help you grow. And I think the third thing that comes to mind is when I was going through, you know, some challenges a few years ago with a lot of changes in my life. Like, things happen really quickly, especially when I had my kids at 25 to now, well, kind of 25 to 30. Those 5 years for me were like hugely transformational, but I also required support from a therapy perspective to help me understand what was going on, because I had 3 kids within about 4 years. You know, my business was growing. I had a lot of changes happening in terms of my friend circle and my environment, financial changes, you know, and trying to adapt to those. And then so I had a therapist at the time who was trying to help me make sense of things. And there's a couple of things he said that were really poignant. One of them was, you're not at war anymore. And so stop acting like that. Stop like responding to things as if you're in a war zone, right? And so when I was growing up, it felt like that, right? Like, you know, there were a lot of times where we had challenges in our growing up. Mom was raising her by ourselves. And then, you know, I got married young and I'm like, you know, trying to build my businesses. And that always felt like kind of fight. And I was fortunate enough to get to a place, you know, as I was having my kids, that also I didn't have to worry about some of those things. But I was still responding like that. And so he kind of put me in that mindset of like, look, allow yourself to appreciate the beauty now that you have these children. You know, you've got this, you know, amazing wife. You've got, you know, a kind of foundation to stand upon, and appreciate that for what it is. And then allow yourself to fight the battles where it's required, but that's not your entire life anymore. And the second thing that he said was, you know, you only have to worry about the kind of the immediate square footage around you, and don't be stressing about everything beyond that, right? And so once you've done that, that's like that's like yourself and probably like your immediate family, like your parents or siblings and your own home. And beyond that, that's when you have like, you know, your friends and, you know, maybe your wider family, and then maybe the community comes after that. And then thinking about the outside world. And sometimes all I was thinking about was, okay, like, how am I coming across to the entire world? But that's not important, right? Like, and we live in this world right now where we think that that's important and that's necessary. But if you're doing that, you're not even ready yet to present yourself to the immediate square foot around you, right? Like, just your parents and your wife and your kids, like, how are they receiving you? Like, what do they really think about you? You know, so first of all, primarily for me, it's like, okay, if something's not correct, like sometimes even, you know, we trip up, like I might act a type of way that makes my son react a way towards me. And I'm like, interesting, I shouldn't have done that. Let me think about that and then adjust. And so, but if I don't do that, and I'm just trying to like be out here and be this guy that people see as whatever, you know, this guy that does this, that, the other, some of us do. But actually inside, you come back home and they're like, yeah, you're not that guy. You know what I mean? And I think that was important for me to make sure that within my house, I am everything I want to be. And I have the absolute best kind of relationships and reviews from the people that matter the most. And then let me take it a step further. Let me think about my friends. Then let me think about the wider community and the world. But I was kind of sometimes doing the reverse. I was like, what do I come across like in the world? And then what am I doing for everyone else? And then what are my friends getting from this? How do I look? What do they think about me? And then almost in between that, I'm kind of letting my family exist. But just flipping that on its head, I think was, you know, very transformational for me, I think, in how I understood things.
Bro, you just dropped like a few minutes of gems, and there's a few things
it's nice to just share that though. Like, you know, it's a great environment to do that.
Oh, alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair. There's a few things that I want to come back to on there actually and respond to, because I think they were so incredibly important. So one thing that you mentioned there is you actually decided to go through with a therapist in that time period. And I just want to commend you on that, because, bro, there's a lot of people that go through hard periods in their life and they don't take a moment out to think about, how is this really affecting them, and how will this affect the people around them, and how are they gonna then operate from this moment moving forward as well? Like, what imprint will this challenge leave in their mind and in their heart as they move on? And you kind of took that moment to be like, okay, do you know what? I need to make sure that I'm navigating this whole situation that's going on. I need to navigate it properly, and I need somebody who knows how to help me navigate that. And a therapist doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what to do, but it just helps you navigate your thoughts, right? And alhamdulillah, I also done that. You know, at that point, I think, you know, a very similar feeling, you know, where I'm 29 now. I've had 3 kids in a short space of time. I've been career switching, building business, doing loads of different things. And it's like, okay, I need to really understand what's going on with my mindset and whether I'm moving forward in healthy ways. And I you know what, I found an incredible thing that you took out from therapy, which I took out from therapy as well, which is not worrying so much about what the biggest vision for yourself is. And sometimes I feel like those who are ambitious, like I can see in yourself, you're somebody who's super ambitious, and not just see, you've obviously proven it in terms of the things that you managed to do, alhamdulillah. For somebody like that, it sort of pushes you into a position, into a mindset that you're always thinking about the largest vision. Like, how do I affect the most amount of people with positivity? How do I show myself up in the world with my image and who I am, and how do I contribute back, and how do I give back to the community, the ummah, the society, mankind? What legacy do I leave behind? So always these grand visions that are in mind. And when you're caught up in those grand visions, unfortunately, you forget what's going on immediately with you, and what's going on internally in terms of your own spirit, what's going on with your family members, what's going on with your children. And when you forget about those things, it becomes incredibly hard for you to then be present in those moments when you're supposed to be present, because your mind and your heart is so focused on all these other grand things that you can't really bring yourself back. And, you know, when I was discussing this with my therapist, what I realized is, you know, sometimes a lot of that comes from needing some sort of validation that you never really received before. And in my case, you know, it probably made sense that it was, you know, not growing up with dad and stuff like that. I probably needed a pat on the back. And so I wanted to do the biggest and the grandest things for myself. And I wasn't looking for a pat on the back from anybody else, but from myself. And I think that's what's the hardest thing is to swallow. Is like, well, I am who I am right now. Like I'm visioning myself. I'm thinking about who I want to be later down the line, and I'm chasing that vision. I'm chasing it, chasing it, chasing it. And it's I'm never gonna get there until I appreciate who I am right now, and I live with who I am right now.
Really,
And I realized that that same thing affected my relationship with my kids. And so the kind of transition back to being a dad, right, is I was always looking at, and I still do, and I'm still on this journey trying to kind of, I guess, fix this part of myself. But I'm always trying to see, how do my children view me? Do they view me as like the greatest dad in the world or not? Right? So you know when you get those best dad mugs, right? It's like, am I actually? Can I hold that with pride? Right?
Am I worthy of the mug, or am I the mug?
Exactly. Good on. Right? And so I'm thinking about that constantly. So when anything happens that kind of makes me feel like I'm not that, it really feels heavy. And it could be such a small thing, like my son rolling his eyes at me. Now I'm viewing that as, okay, you're disrespectful. But what do I mean by disrespectful? It's, you don't actually think I'm good and I'm a great dad. So really, I'm just beating myself up by looking at what my kids are doing, actually. And you know, going through the therapy is kind of making me realize and help me realize that vision that I have of a father is kind of this false image that I've created in my head of what this great father actually means. And if I actually just focused on who I am right now with my children, I wouldn't necessarily have to react in that way when my child rolls their eyes. I could probably understand, why are they rolling their eyes? Where are they coming from? What's their perspective? What drove them to that behavior? And actually just address what's going on right now, rather than thinking, oh, it's because of that thing over there.
No, it's 100% true. You have to rewire that. A lot of that is that rewiring, and I think that's with most concepts, man. In our life, like, this is where this idea of first principle thinking comes into life in general, which is to rewire, kind of break things down to their, foundation, right, and then build back up again. And so obviously people do this from a figurative sense, like if they're, building a rocket in Elon Musk's case, or, if they're building a business or whatever it is. But you can also do it in every single facet of your life, including parenthood, where you break concepts down to the core and say, okay, yeah, it's too big of a question to say, what does parenthood mean, right? Like, that's too much of a, out there thing to even get your head around. But instead, you want to start with, okay, your behaviors, like for example, what things, feel disrespectful to me? Well, are there things that we've just been told to do? Like, for example, when you tell your kids, don't do that, you're being naughty, or I'm going to do this, or like whatever it is. There's environments in which, punishment is required, of course, and, discipline is required. There are places where it is, but we don't just want to mimic something that happened 25 years ago onto our children today without thinking about it, just because that's what we saw or what we think we should do, because it makes us feel fuzzy inside, because that's how we were raised. And so we think, because we think we're amazing, that like our children are only going to become amazing if we do what our parents did, type of mindset. Instead, it's like, no, like, okay, what is my child actually doing? Okay, they're, for example, cutting up pieces of paper into small triangles. Is it a headache for me to clean up? Yes. Are they being naughty, really? And no. Like, is it messy? Yeah. Is it annoying for me to have to? Yes. But what are they getting out of it? You know what I mean? Like, what is it looking at from their perspective? Why are they doing that? And so when you think about that, I think it allows you to also have empathy from their side, and then readjust and be like, okay, there's moments where I can be more calm. There's moments where I don't have to kind of say certain things like, you're messing about, or like, stop doing that. Because again, we're giving them these blockers of almost like, don't, as opposed to more, how can we be more on the side of, go ahead, do it. Why not? What do you think? And even, for example, how we deal with, by the way, and I was going to say the other side, then the things that you can, the positives of you being raised are things that you have to then factor in. Like, it's not all about rewiring kind of how your parents raised you type of thing. It's like, there's plenty of things that we've all been raised with that are very good lessons. I think one of them that we implement in our house is how we apologize, right? And so that is the same rule for my wife and I. Like, for example, there's been situations in our house where, I've like fallen short of like, being, somewhere else in my head, or like, I should have been present with the family on a certain day, and it might have upset my wife. And then, the whole house is kind of, a bit, upside down because I haven't got myself together. And then when it's impacting the family and the kids, and, even I've sat down, this would be rare occasions, but I've sat down even in front of the kids And I said, Daddy's going to apologize to Mummy. So I'm going to say sorry to Mummy because I didn't do this, and it made Mummy feel like this. Yeah, and that's why Mummy is feeling upset. So Daddy's going to apologize. I'm going to say sorry. And then, I'll do that in front of them. And so on a particular occasion, we were all actually involved because the kids were also giving her a hard time. And so we all went around and apologized to her. And we had to say why we were apologizing. So we understood why we were doing that. And then we said, okay, tomorrow we're going to have a better day. And so even them seeing that, look, I'm not someone that can't apologize, in the house. I'm not this grand figure that is like free of fault. And then also with them, similarly, like when they mess about, okay, you mess around, cool. Now it doesn't work to go ahead and say, come here right now. Say sorry. It's not like, it's more like, okay, they're going to be angry. Same way as we all get angry, right? They're understanding what emotions are. So if like the elder son has like, annoyed his younger brother and then stormed off, all right, cool, go have your moment. But just know that when you calm down, you'll come back. And the first thing you're going to do before you do anything else, you're going to apologize. And then so he knows that he's not going to be able to do anything else, like no other activity, nothing else until you've apologized. So when you can go ahead and be angry, but when you calm down and come back, you're going to say sorry, and then you're also going to have to say why you're sorry. And that's one of those lessons that I took from growing up with my mom, which always was, you have to know why you're apologizing. You don't want sorry to just be this blanket word that you just say because you can get on with something. If you don't understand mentally what you're actually apologizing for and why that might have made, how that might have made someone feel, you'll never really be able to empathize, because it's like that when people say, sorry if I upset you. It's like that. I don't ever want my kids to be like that, right? It's like, the sorry or the apology has to be sincere, and you have to know why you're saying it, and you should back it if you're saying it. And if you don't believe you should be apologized, that's also okay. Talk about it. You know what I mean? Why do you not think? Because there could be different sides to a story, right? So why do you not think you're in the wrong? And that can also, like, this was a couple of days ago actually. My daughter, I sent her to her room. And it was around iftar time, and like, because bedtime is around iftar time right now.
Yeah.
And the kids were being a bit chaotic, they were messing around, and I just said, the boys had gone to sleep, and then she was like kind of hovering around. I said, look, you got to go to bed. And then I was having iftar and she was like crying, and I was like, Sienna, I said, look, you just got to go to bed now. I'm having iftar now, making too much noise. Once I've prayed, I'll come up and then I'll tuck you in. But she just kept having a tantrum, and it was very unlike her because she doesn't really have these tantrums. And I, after a while, had gone up, spoken to her, and sat down and realized that actually all she was trying to tell me is that she got this book from school, because me and her, she loves filmmaking right now. Like we watch films and then we'll like analyze them together. And so she's very creative in that sense. It's beautiful. And I love that. As a kid, I was into that. I went to film school and I enjoyed those things. And so she got this book, and it's the first time she brought a book home on film. And I'm like, man, that's such a big deal for her to like, that's something like something that in her future she'll remember that I got this book because this thing my dad and I have an interest in, and I just sent her to her room that evening, but I didn't know, right? And so when she told me, my heart broke, and I was like, no, and then I felt sorry, and then I apologized to her, sat with her, took the time, and course corrected. And so I think like, even to be able to empathize and see that, and like, look, we're not perfect, I'm not this parent that's just gonna like ignore how you're feeling. I think it's super important, and it just teaches all of us in the home, that environment, in these four walls, that kind of all of the lessons, like how the dad is towards a mum, how the dad is towards helping in the house. How it's like, to me, this idea of like, I don't believe in it at all. I actually think it's a ridiculous statement anyway, but like, almost, the father doing chores or helping around is almost like, takes away from masculinity. It's so bizarre, to me. I think like the most masculine thing is to be emotionally present, right? And to show that like you have a softness to you, like, because when it comes down to it, like actually a man who can control his emotions, and then when it's time to go to 100, can also go to 100, right? That's like very important. Like, you don't have to use it. And so when you're projecting this in the house of like, I don't do this, or make this for me, or give me this, or it's like, bro, that's not how life works. And in fact, if anything, you're much weaker as a man acting like that, because you're trying to project, as opposed to being like, I don't need nothing, I'm good. And then through respect, you actually get all the things you desire and want, because it's such a pure feeling, but you don't have to enforce it, right? It's just it's just an environment that like exists like that. And that's for everyone. Same with our kids, my wife, everyone has that type of respect both ways.
No, it's like here, bro. That I think that's so important. Is to have that respect in the household. And you mentioned about focusing on these four walls and ensuring that within that household, everybody feels like they're supported, and clearly that what you're describing your household is that there's an openness about one's emotions. Apologize if you need to apologize, right? And so I actually wanted to ask you. A lot of times when people talk about moving abroad or this concept of immigration and things like this, sometimes the one thing that a lot of parents may not think about when they're trying to move abroad, I mean, a lot of the times the reason is for finances or for religious reasons, but maybe one thing that we don't think about is how it's going to affect our family. And I just wanted to ask you, like, now that you've had some time in a new environment, in a new country, in a new household, how do you feel like that has affected those four walls? How do you feel like do you feel like that has brought the family closer together? Do you feel like it's created some sort of difficulties in terms of how you bond with your wife and your children now that you're in a brand new environment, a brand new society? Or do you feel like, okay, whatever we were doing in London, those four walls can just be transferred to this side of the world and we can carry on exactly how we were?
Absolutely. I think it's more that, and I think that a big part of that, it starts with you and your spouse. I remember when we first got married and I spent so much money in the wedding and all this type of stuff. And then like, there was a moment where I literally was one thing to our wedding and I just didn't know how we were going to afford things in like the future. And I was a bit like all over the place, like I was starting out a new business and there's a lot of that stuff going on. And I remember speaking to my wife and I was quite emotional about it. And then she said something to me then, which I always bring up to her because I tell her how important it was what she said. She said, look, I don't care even if I had to be in like a box room with you and our kids. This is before we even had kids or anything. I want to be with you and we'll figure it out. And so like that to this day is like a battery pack I have in me, right? And so that followed us into our move, right? Where no matter what it is, I think some of the challenge, first of all, I had my mum, when I was growing up, who was super just supportive and like, look, however I'm seeing things, she's like, yeah, go ahead. Like that's, if that's how you see and feel it, and cool. And then I was blessed enough to now have my wife who's, just like that too, which is go ahead, like I back you, and I think that's so important. And so when it came to the move, like we had the shared vision of what we wanted to do, and that's always important, but then we could play our roles. And so I think like, what we've noticed is there was times in our marriage, and especially when we were raising the kids, when all of them were babies, where it felt like we all had to do everything 50-50. And I think a lot of parents can relate to this, right? Where it feels like, okay, if I'm doing this, if I'm washing the bottles, then you got to wash the bottles. If I'm doing this, then you got to do this. And it feels a bit like that. And then we kind of saw over time, and I would have my agitations in that because I'm not trying to work and this. And it was after I think our second child that we came to this point of like, hold on a second. There are things that are like that. However, in general, it's better when we take ownership of a specific thing. And maybe there are some things where it's 100% me and some things are 100% you. And that kind of space balances itself out. And also, like, I can do the things that you might do, but you just know that you've got it. And if you need it, you can tap me in. But I'm not going to don't have an expectation that I'm going to do it because I'm expecting that you're going to have it covered. And so one of the main versions of that was like, with, for example, just the attention home and to the kids, which my wife took on that role 100%, which is like she's the director of the house, right? Which includes even for me, which is, look, I'm going with her guidance. She's got her pulse on the house or how the kids are feeling, every little thing. And she takes ownership in that. And so when we moved, a big part of that was, okay, I'll handle that, right? Don't worry, like with the activities with the kids, where we're going. And yeah, she's had challenges, since we moved here with like feeling lonely and, missing her family. There's a lot of stuff going on. But in all of that, when she needs the support, I can read the room. I understand her emotional need to know when I need to step in. But in general, we understand how those roles are. And then same for me, it's like, okay, I know what I've got to deliver in. But then those fundamentals of our home environment, things such as things that never change, like I said, whether we're in a box room or we've had to move somewhere else, move houses. We've moved houses a few times and now we've moved country. The things that always have to remain the same is like our environment shouldn't change what we have between us, right? Like that should be consistent no matter where we are. And those things are those values and principles. So our roles, definitely the communication, the transparency, and it's not transparency, like she doesn't know like what I'm working on daily, it's not like that. It's more like just in terms of vision and path and goals, right? Like And this, again, it's not this activity you do, but we've never whipped out a whiteboard and a pen and paper in our life together. You know what I mean? It's like just a understanding. And sometimes it's just a check-in in the evening. You know what I mean? Like it's just allowing open conversations to happen in passing, because inspiration strikes at random times. And, you know, there's never a structured way to run a family and have these conversations. It's more like as you're going, if something sparks off and like there's something that I might want to share, I know I can have that dialogue and she can have that with me. And it's that constant kind of, you know, openness. I think those type of things, create this kind of gel between everyone. And then as we're moving, and any challenge you go through is kind of like protected by that wall in a sense, where like a challenge can come in. Sometimes the challenge is my wife is going through a challenge. I might go through a challenge. Our children went through challenges when they moved school. There's a lot of things going on. And so, but it's protected under this kind of blanket that we've created or try to create and thicken of like, you know, our kind of, you know, family environment and our home. And that home is more than just the four walls. So I think, that kind of transports wherever we go. And I'd say my wife is really kind of the main one, you know, creating that and protecting that, you know, and she does it so well.
That's beautiful, bro. Alhamdulillah, that's really beautiful. Really appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of people do overlook, you know, how important it is to kind of keep that relationship as strong as possible, no matter where you're moving and where you're going, that kind of thing stable and remains consistent. And even if environments change and you adapt to those environments, your relationship with your spouse and the values that you hold in your house do need to remain. I wanted to bring up TeeniTales, bro. This is something I wanted to kind of get a good understanding of. So you released, I'm going to let you explain exactly what it is, but it's essentially an AI tool that you've released, and it's very family focused. And I have started using it. So I ended up signing up. I think it's on a beta right now. And
yes.
So I started using it, and I was just speaking to a brother last night at Tarawih about it, and I was saying, bro, there's this thing you need to check out. It's like, because he was talking to me about like children's books and stuff, and I was like, if you want to make your own, you got to use this, right? So Omar, why don't you introduce what the idea is, and then tell us the journey of like how it came about, because as far as I could tell, you put something up, but I can't remember fully that it came out something to do with you and your children going through bedtime stories, and then you kind of landed on this idea. So I really want to understand this, inshallah. So tell us a bit about it and the journey you came to
well, thank you for being an early user, man. We're just about to release the first version of the product properly. So if you go to TeeniTales.com, so that's TeeniTales, so like book tales, TeeniTales.com, you can sign up and get kind of first access. And so it's basically, I mean, you explained it really well, but it essentially is creating, you know, any type of story you want. Almost like, what if your child could be the star of their own Disney movie? You know, think of it like that. That's really like the vision. And so with AI now, you can get to a point where you can create beautiful stories, and also you can do amazing things with imagery, right? Where you can take a likeness of a character or a child or a photo, and have a AI generated Pixar level graphic created of them. And then you can also generate the story using AI based on your preferences, based on what the child wants to experience, based on what they're learning, based on their reading age, all these type of kind of variables. And then you can output the story that's beautifully visual. It's like, you know, something that you can read with them. It follows the kind of, you know, interest that they particularly have. And it's really, really cool, man. Like, you know, even I just can't wait to get it fully into people's hands, because I'm always messing around with it, and it's just, you know, awesome. And then we're going to take it into kind of the video mode, inshallah, over time, where we hope that we can have something that you can literally create a story on the fly and just have it up on the screen that, you know, you could, you know, or even narrate, for example, like, you know, a holiday you went on, you know, through your child's, you know, lens and, you know, imagery. So I think that would be amazing. So that's the idea that I think we'll get to, but video models are still kind of getting better in AI. And so, my background a lot has been in kind of product development and technology and design. And so kind of all those things come together now. And with AI, you know, it kind of, you know, lends a strong focus into, you know, all of those kind of areas, and allows me to capitalize those. And I think TeeniTales is a great example of a product that I think takes my design background, my parenting know-how, and, you know, first-hand experience, and, you know, pain points, and also kind of what this technology enables, and being at the forefront of that technology in my day-to-day enables me to kind of see what's possible. So I think that's kind of where everything gels together. And by the way, another cool idea down the line, I think, could you have a world where kids can almost, be watching on their TV like a version of a video they've just created with their own characters, and then be dubbing the voices with the script coming up, so they can be the characters in their own movie now, right? And so if you think about it, technically all of that is possible. And so, I love to approach these things from an idea of like, okay, is it technically possible? Absolutely. Then it's a question of how we get there, and that becomes then like the curiosity and the work. And so with TeeniTales, it was very random, because I think when ChatGPT first came out, obviously, as most of us, were just kind of blown away by this type of technology. And then I very early, at that time, I think my daughter was probably maybe 6 or something, or maybe just turned 6. But she was curious enough to just be sitting and watching, or like whatever I'm doing on laptop. And I kind of just started just typing random things in and just trying to see, like, I can't remember what things I would type in with her, but she would enjoy it. And then we did a story once and she enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, hold on a second. It just wrote a story out. That blew my mind. It's the first time I saw it write a story. And then it released an image model. And then I was like, okay, well, if it can take an image, can it read an image? And it could read the image. And I was like, okay, if it can read the image, can it understand the likeness? And then I kind of worked through the prompts to figure out the way that you can talk to this stuff to get a story and like image likeness. And I created like a PowerPoint presentation with like pictures of her on it. And the story was around her, going to a safari. And then we created the story, and then she loved it. Like, she actually enjoyed reading it. And then what happened is we just did that one random morning, and then like there was no name for it or anything. And then the kids were like just obsessed with it, and especially her and my son. Like every day, this is when we're still in London, we're like, Daddy, can we do a story again? Can we do a story again? And like, what? Like they never asked me this much for. And then we did it again, and they're like, couldn't believe it. And then, but honestly, till this day, it's been almost 2 years now since we've been just tinkering with this thing. They say, Dad, can we do TeeniTales? And so every basically Saturday morning, like Saturday mornings are like Mummy's lying morning, and then like they call it Daddy morning. So it's like my morning where I'm up with them from the early, and we're doing activities. And so AI is like always an activity we're doing. And so now they're doing advanced stuff, man. They're like, they do all sorts now, like, Play-Doh activities and creative stuff, and we're always coming up with things. But I love the fact they're getting into this technology, because it is going to be the way the world is. But now Sienna was such a big part of like TeeniTales journey. We came up with a name, and I ran the name past her, and she was like, I've got early videos of all this as well, which I might release at some point. And she loved the name, and I was like, great, okay, if you like it, I like it. And then, she went with it, and then she has these ideas of how, when we release it, she wants us to go to her friends, her school, and present it to the kids, in her class, and do it with them. And so there's this enthusiasm that she has for this kind of concept. It also, I think, blends so well with both of our interests in kind of storytelling and movie making. And I think like that's where it works well. And so it's more like this project that I've now taken upon as like something that we're actually building, but using her constantly as like a reference point of like, okay, do you should do this? Do you like this? Or what do you think about this? And now we started to create stories for other people in our family who started to ask me how they could do it. And it's actually quite challenging to just do by yourself, because it takes a bit of time. So TeeniTales was like a software or tool that you can just go in as a parent and literally just say, where's your kid going? What do they want to learn about? What's the moral of the story? And it just generates it all for you in a few moments. And so that's like the fun of it. And there's so many directions we can go in it over time. And I think there'll be loads of interesting ideas that come from it. But what I really want is a few things. I think, first of all, I want every child to experience a level of joy and enthusiasm that I see my kids have for working with AI, because I truly think it's that magical, and it will be transformational in their life. I think like the fact that we have people who are our age, some people who don't even know how to use computers properly, I think, it's okay, but would you get much further if you understood how technology works? Absolutely, right? And like you're seeing it now, the fact that AI is coming as a level of technology, and people who don't even know how to use a laptop are probably like, how do I even do that? And so we do kind of have a duty to teach the next generation how this technology is going to work, so that when, whatever comes down the line, they're able to adapt to that as well in the future, because they'll have this foundational understanding. So I think that's one thing that I want for children. And I think the second thing is like, it's a great way for parents to interact with their kids and to also learn how to use AI and what's possible here. And so it lends itself really well to our generation. I think thirdly, I think timing wise, from a business opportunity perspective now, it's like, look, people are getting more and more fed up with type of content that's kind of just being shoved down your throats, and that you don't really have a say in it. Your kids might really love watching Sonic for argument's sake, and you take them to the movie and they just got, all these innuendos and left and right things that they're trying to put in there. And, well, let's just make our own stories now. Let's create our own stories. And, you have your Omar and Hannahs of the world, but like, no one's yet been able to crack. How can you have that at scale and in a way that's like, everywhere and based on the characters of your kids themselves, which makes them more engaged. So I think, it's a lot of fun to work on, and it's something that I've just seen work in real time. And so now it's like, let's share this with the world. And now we've got to a point where the technology is there. And I think the interest has been there. I didn't even know if people would be interested. I put it up in my stories, I think. And there was like thousands of emails that people just put in.
Wow.
Like, it was ridiculous. And there's nothing I've actually really, and I've done a lot of different things that, have worked quite well as well. like, this was one of those things that I was like blown away. Had no idea that this many people wanted to use it. So we got everyone, working on this right now and trying to get it out as soon as possible, but it'll be fun. It'll be fun when people get to play with it. And inshallah, I think April will be where we're releasing the first beta for people to start actually creating the stories.
MashaAllah. No, that's wicked, bro. It's been super interesting just kind of seeing the growth and development on it from your stories and stuff, and you kind of just releasing those little clips on, okay, if you can just click this and it will change the character, the way the character looks, it will change the dialogue according to this particular reading level. And what I love the most is that this all developed out of a conversation with you and your children, just out of your parenting, your love for parenting, your love for bringing joy to your children. You've managed to kind of marry that up with your interests, and you've managed to marry that up with the technology that is sort of booming at the moment. And you've actually now created a solution to people's problems, which is giving them a reference for their story time, essentially. Like, okay, how do I create a bedtime story for my kids? Or, how do I create something appropriate for my kids to enjoy? And how do I create something with my children? Like you said, this is something that can be a project with your children. It's not just the parents have to go out and do it, but actually you can sit down with your kids and say, okay, what characters should we put in? What should the story be like? What should we do? And from what I can see from the UI and stuff, it's just like very simple to be able to do that. Very, very easy to be able to do that, subhanAllah. So
that's the one to be fun. Like, for sure. I've wanted to design like a kids sub product for a while, and so this was a good way to do that. But I think that actually the thing that I have to hold back a lot of times is the amount of ideas we have versus what makes sense to release to start with. And so, you want to make sure you're just kind of, releasing something so people can start playing with it and then working on their feedback. But in terms of ideas, like, I'm telling you, like, if right now I just said to my daughter, hey, come in, let's talk about TeeniTales, like, we would have an hour-long conversation about ideas. But I think that's what makes it so engaging as well as a parent, because, I don't feel like when I'm with them, my brain doesn't go numb, like, what do we do? It's like there's always something to figure out and problem solve. And I think, like, look, my mind is always switched on. Like, I'm just one of those guys, and I find it hard to not be. And so the fact that I can just like transport it into their world, and even when they're doing homework and stuff, we just turn it into a fun AI activity. Like, recently we just took pictures of some of their workbooks, and I didn't understand a certain concept, and then it helped me out. So I said, look, give me notes as a parent on how I can teach my child what to do on this page. And so they're doing something, and then it helped me. And so they couldn't see them on my screen, but it almost gave me a script, and it said, okay, now ask Sienna to do this. And the best thing is it learns her over time. And so now the tools I use understand, this isn't in TeeniTales, obviously, it's generally with AI, but like understands Sienna's learning preferences or Caden's learning preferences, and then knows how I should teach them. And so even things like that, man, that we can all do immediately right now. You can download ChatGPT, take a picture of like a worksheet that your child is doing, and then ask it to give you a script on how to guide them. And then you give it feedback, and you can record your audio, put it in there, and all these things. And like, eventually over time, you basically just have a personal tutor in your pocket, but you also have the tools, so you can do what a tutor would do, but with your level of interest and engagement as a parent. So it's and this is all early days, man. It's mind blowing, how this will turn out.
That's incredible. I would love. I know you need to run now, but I would just love to see more of this, to be honest. Like, this TeeniTales is just one thing when it comes to what parents can do with AI. And as somebody who's passionate about parenthood, clearly, I would love to see what else can be done and how far this can go, inshallah. And I'm sure you start thinking about what else can be done in this space. And it seems to be quite a new space. It seems to be something that a lot of people could enter and could do quite a lot in.
Yeah, man. I think there was. It's my the challenge right now. Sometimes is time. It's not like I don't have time, because I've purposely, since I've come to Dubai, is like try to design my life more in terms of the way I want to live it. And so I think it's not that I don't have time. It's more like I get so emotionally and creatively invested in the things that I want to do. But I think that's what also makes them feel special to me, right? And and I like sharing them. And so part of an idea was like, I remember there was Art Attack when we grow up, and I think you probably remember that as well, right? So it's like, could you have a version of that, but with AI? You know what I mean? Like, could you have a beautiful production, where you're teaching kids, instead of like making crafts, how to do one or two things with AI in each episode, and I think that would like kill it. And I think, like, honestly, I think it would be bigger than even Miss Rachel. And could I do it? Could I do it with my daughter and my kids? Absolutely. Like, would I want to do it? Yes. But just haven't got around to like, nailing it. But things like that, which I'm like, I'm definitely got a passion for. How can we bring parents, kids together and this technology? And I think, we'll find our way. I think, when we release this, we'll see how this works. Maybe TeeniTales becomes the angle for us to do different other offshoot content and ways to engage parents, and maybe workshops. But I definitely think, like, just in terms of, again, I don't know how it all stitches together, but in terms of feeling in my heart that makes me feel happy, is this kind of beautiful world of creativity, technology, parenthood, children. Like, what does that look like, in terms of physical space, in terms of digital tools? Like, what is that like? And then I can bring my kind of creative background and then deliver it in a way that is, very user-friendly as well. So yeah, that's the curiosity, definitely. That has taken up a lot of my mental energy, and I think physically as well, we're working on it quite heavily. So it'll be cool to see how this plays out, I think, over the next maybe months and then years ahead.
Inshallah. Bro, it's been a pleasure having you on board on the podcast. We've covered quite a lot there, and it's been quite inspirational, to be honest, to hear some of your perspectives on parenting, and to see how far, inshallah, TeeniTales go. We'll put it in the description and send it out to the community, and hopefully get a few more people on board and starting to use it, inshallah.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Shoaib. Really nice speaking to you, man.
Nice to speak to you, bro. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Islam.
Alright guys, so if you enjoyed that video, please do subscribe and follow me on TikTok and Instagram for more dad related content. Check out some of my previous videos and look forward to the next ones.